Hi there again. So today I'm here to talk about some case studies, some field examples of what it's like to be on the ground doing all that you think and is social enterprise. So you go into it with one idea, and of course, when you're doing it, lots of other angles, experiences, and challenges arise organically as you move on. So the more open you are and the more passionate you are about your actual journey, service, product, the more opportunity will come your way because people will pick up on your enthusiasm. So I wondered how many of you have watched Seaspiracy recently. Everybody's talking about it. It's on Netflix. I believe it's a sister documentary of Cowspiracy, which is all about showing the truth behind certain food-based industries. Seaspiracy is all about the ocean-based fishing activities globally and its demise, its effect on the environment, and also on us eventually as well. Without the ocean, we don't exist. But not to go on too much about that, why I'm mentioning it is because it is a documentary similar to Seaspiracy called Shark Water that inspired me from a very early time in Fiji to get into the water and start coral gardening, reviving the reefs and helping them out, really. The reefs are quite fine on their own generally without global warming. But when we get involved, we can speed up the recovery process after cyclone destruction, footfall, which means the feet of tourists touching them, kicking them, whatnot, anchorage, and general degradation. But those are the top three reasons a reef will be under threat. Coral bleaching is the main one, of course. That's more of a global warming issue. So all of these mixed together, we could see the reefs just, especially after cyclone damage, just devastated. And you can't believe, but they look like deserts underwater. And for me, coming from, humble Britain, London, Bristol, I wasn't aware of any of this. It was way before the media had talked about coral gardening. It was a new concept completely. The reason I was introduced to it was that Austin Bower Kirby worked for a short period of time on a contract in the NGO that I was marketing manager in 2009. That's the reason I went to Fiji in the first place, by the way. Volunteering opened up doors for me that opened up doors to start my own business, Island Spirit. So I was working in the charity health sector for 10 years, from 20 to 30 years old, and writing and being on TV a bit and a bit of radio, but mainly writing press releases and advocating healthcare charities like the Meningitis Trust, the Pennybourne Cancer Care Centre. So all of that experience was helpful when I decided to volunteer for 10 months in Fiji. So I was doing the same there, but I was working with a grassroots organisation. So it was that point that I met Austin Bower Kirby, who is currently one of the leading experts in coral conservation today, and is on TED Talk. If you want to look him up, he's on TED Talks talking about coral gardening. And so, I started to become interested, and therefore I started to do it. And I remember vividly Jackie telling me, this is how you do it. Let's get in the water. And we went off in the water. We did some coral gardening. She showed me how to pick up florets of staghorn coral and collect them in the boat, and then one by one relocate the boat a few meters away, and plant the ones that we had collected that were moving around on the seabed, unattached to any substrate, with a 90% chance of death. We were moving them to another area of the ocean bed with substrate, which means rock, and we were taking them to bits to make florets about half the size of my hand, and then plugging them into the holes in the substrate. And I found the process just mesmerizing because it was hard work. We were up and down, holding our breath, upside down, planting these florets in the substrate. And she, meanwhile, the logistics of that are, you know, she's trying to teach me. We come up, we grab a breath, and we're treading water with our snorkel equipment and our fins flapping away. And she's saying, look, this is how you have to do that bit, and this is how you find the correct hole for the correct size for the floret that you're planting. And so it was all completely out of breath. But she was the one that inspired the thought. And it occurred to me that actually what we need is hands, because the training, it's called applied conservation. Applied is when it's just easy to do. It's not some scientific process that's too hard, or, you know, you don't have to have a degree in a scientific speciality. Anyone can get involved. So yes, coral gardening is all about being able to swim, snorkel, and have the passion and drive to be in the water for a number of hours a day planting coral. So yeah, after 2 days of your coral being happily plugged into the correct hole, which isn't always the case, you have to go back and check them. If they're not moving around once you plug them in, like you give them a little flick, and if it's very secure, in 2 days' time, you go back and they excrete their natural super glue. So it's like magic. And these kind of tiny details haven't been discovered. Many, many, many millions of other magical realities underneath the ocean, especially in the reef system, are undiscovered completely. And I knew at that point I was witnessing stuff that people on the planet just didn't know about. But I'm not a scientist, so I wasn't logging it particularly, but we were just planting coral humbly in Fiji, and helping revive a reef. Here we are 7 years later, and everyone is talking about coral gardening, coral planting, coral bleaching, global climate rise, climate change, much more than they were before. But this is the moral of that story is to really open doors and say yes to any opportunity that might come along in your field of maybe it's tourism and entrepreneurship, maybe it's social enterprise and tourism, maybe it's just social enterprise, maybe it's whatever. Maybe it's to do with local communities, teaching young people how to do something new, a community interest company. If you're going into any of these branches of more like virtuous business in tourism, then keep opening doors and keep your eyes wide open. So keeping on the topic of fishing and the oceans, which is a huge part of life in the Fijian Islands and in Sri Lanka as well, I wanted to talk a bit about the challenges of introducing a tambu area, which is a fishing no-take area, no-take zone. We have them in the UK as well. They can be called marine protected areas more professionally, but in Fiji, the local term is a tambu area. It's forbidden. It means forbidden in Fijian. So one of the villages I worked with called Waitambu was the provider of these incredible snorkeling experiences for my guests, my volunteers and guests doing some eco holidays or some volunteer projects. Either way, whoever I was hosting at the time, they would always spend half a day with Waitambu. And Waitambu village are run, as every outer island village, with a chief and a spokesman, run by the chief, and there's a team in this particular village who look after the marine protected area. So there's a little office and a manager. There was a homestay manager, so our guests would stay in their tiny little shacks for a few nights, for the experience and cultural immersion side of the journey that they were on in Fiji, but also that we would take them on a boat out to the reef, and they would dive down, bump into a shark or two, some grouper, some humphead wrasse, wonderful fish that you just never see in this environment. They're so big, and the reason they're so big is because, number one, they haven't been fished. recently, but these fish are about 50 years old. You know, they can be really old fish. But the really interesting thing is, because the Tambu area is quite recent, it's only 10 years old. So the fish are generally bigger because they're not being fished, but also the older fish who know about this like relaxed area underwater, they come here from far afield because they sense fear and they know when fishermen are about. So it's quite interesting if you think about like a herd of bison, or let's say more locally Exmoor ponies, they have a flight distance, so they would freak out if a dog and a walker came past them. So fish are exactly the same. They know exactly what a fisherman looks like. They also know what spear fishermen look like, with long spears, with like a whole load, like 20 different reef fish hanging on their belt. So fish are very clever. So what we were seeing is incredible shoals of fish that were super rare to the fishermen. So this is all very well, and each guest was paying $60, which is £20 per head for a 2 or 3 hour snorkeling trip. In Fiji, this is extortionate, but I was ready to pay it to the village because I felt that it was a valuable, life-changing experience, and many, especially the younger generation from high school's children, would never have seen that before. They were coming over from Australia, Geelong in, I believe it's Victoria. No, it wasn't. It's near Sydney, sorry. And they wouldn't have had a chance to go up to the Great Barrier Reef. Even if they would in their future life, this would be one of the most spectacular underwater vistas they'll ever see. So I was willing to pay for that. And also, because I was working with another marine biologist called Helen Sykes, because she was very interested in community development. So how is this? Well, we're working with the environment to promote community interest projects. She initiated the Tambu area. The locals maintained it and managed it. But what started to happen was that there was a major issue. Number one, greed, which is an awful reality to witness, especially when you're interested in promoting the environment and the local communities. When you see certain members of the community not playing the game, and they're not as educated and worldly as they would be nice for them to be. They're outer islanders. They left school maybe at 15 years old, and they fished all their lives and worked in their village and the forest. When they start getting whiff of money, it goes awfully wrong very, very quickly if you're not on the pulse and managing it. So one of those examples I wanted to share with you, because you can think you're doing something really good for a community, and you've done your research, you've talked to local people, you've talked to experts in the field, but you also have to make it sustainable. So you can't just say, here's an idea, go and deal with it and keep it going. You have to be there all the time to keep it alive and to keep it managed. So what we were seeing was these wonderful fish stocks just growing, even like sea urchins. They were called thawaki locally. We would see an abundance of sea urchins in the take zone because there weren't any groupers, and groupers are their main predators. So just over a few meters away in the no take zone, there were no thawaki sea urchins, which was an indicator of the types of fish that there were being just breeding and being really prevalent. So we were seeing lots of yummy fish breeding, which meant that at night, which meant that we were getting poachers ultimately at nighttime. And how does that work? You're like, oh my God, you can do these wonderful things for Mother Nature, but you do, again, need to manage it. But how you do that from a local's perspective, is very difficult, because if you think about from their point of view, they're saying, right, excellent, we've got all this money coming in from tourists. The value of that grouper is much more alive than it is dead. They understand that, but that takes a long time to teach them. Then they're seeing, just, we're really hungry in the village, we want to just pop in to go and get some of your fish. You've got loads of it. there's too much fish there, you don't need it all, can I come in? And so the brother of the manager of Waitambu, who lives in the next door village, would come in on his boat, take a few fish at night and go out and give a little bribe to the manager. So how do you, oh God, if you watch Seaspiracy, you'll understand my predicament, because it's exactly this problem that's happening in the larger oceans. So where do I come in here? The difficulty there is that I can't do anything. So as a tour provider trying to boost local income, the only way that you can influence such a tricky problem, and this is one of the hardest problems in the marine world, to provide an accountable and productive monitoring, policing of the oceans to keep the poachers out. This is super difficult. But what I could do, and I did, but I could have done more of, because we can always do more, is educate the locals by constantly talking about it, but on a very relaxed level. You don't want to go in and just be another Kapalangi as a Western person telling them what to do. You have to come in, have some kava with them, and introduce the idea through chit chat, maybe a couple of bilos of kava, maybe sitting under a palm tree at the hottest time of year at 2 o'clock, just chatting. But really it's a hard process to go through, where you're constantly weighing up. If I was in my own country where we're dealing with very educated decision makers, would this process be dealt with quicker and more easily? Well, the answer is no, because there's lots of bureaucracy and it still hasn't been proven to work in the oceans on the larger scale throughout the world. But as a principal example, you have to be very patient. So I wanted to share that with you because it kind of demonstrates how the environmental projects interlink with community initiatives and the challenges that are involved in doing so. So this is a bit of a short one. I wanted to highlight that maybe not everybody has the same moral agenda as you do. So an example of that is Lavena village and Waitambu again. So Waitambu had been advised by a very passionate marine biologist, Helen Sykes, for a long time, and it was becoming very, very almost like a familiar, like it was a regime, not regime, that sounds horrendous. I mean, a way of life, like them respecting their oceans was just a thing that they wanted to do, and it seemed to have reaped benefits financially for them. However, the village up the road, which actually specialised in a forest walk, so each of these villages specialised in an eco-tourism activity. It's amazing. But they absolutely refused to let anyone touch their oceans. I mean touch in the sense of advise them not to fish from it. Because they said, we're a bigger village, we need the octopus, and we survive from our reefs, off our reefs. And no matter how many meetings were held from the UN specialists, me as on a more grassroots level, a number of different angles, they wouldn't budge, because they said we need our oceans to survive. The sad thing is of course we all know that they're raping there aren't going to be any more octopus for their children, but they live for today. They don't save money. They have a different outlook of life. So the cultural ways of being are so different from ours. I came to a point where I said, you know, I'm going to stand back on that one. Instead, I'm going to work in the school and teach and do another project, which actually I can go straight on to now. Yeah, I noticed that there were lots of older people in the village who couldn't weave. So we also do this weaving project where we've designed, actually I've got one here. Oh no, I've got to. Anyway, they're yoga mats made from pandanus leaf, which is a dried leaf, dried under the sun, and then it's woven, and we've scaled it down to yoga mat size. Normally they're made really big so everyone can lay on them under the sun in the hottest time of the year. So we work with women to weave those, and then we are the bridge. We bridge the gap between the market and the producer. So we distribute them to America, the Faroe Islands, England. They've been all over the place, and Novena Village makes them. The reason that links to the next project, the reading glasses, is because the women couldn't, the older women who know how to weave really well and really effectively and quickly, their eyes were getting so bad they couldn't see after nightfall. Obviously, they've only got really kind of like yellowy kerosene lamps, if they're lucky, solar lanterns. So they were asking me if I could get them reading glasses, and I've said, yeah, okay, see what I can do. You know, I always say yes. So I went back to England and I found that you can get in Pound Saver one pair of glasses and one pouch. You need the pouch, otherwise they will just get sat on or scratched. So you just need to think about longevity, sustainability again. For £2. So I took back to Fiji on my next visit, 50 pairs, and I have to say, I've given a lot of love to a lot of projects in Fiji, but this particular one has had the most positive feedback I've ever experienced. I think it's something to do with giving older people a new lease in life, but also it's because I definitely responded. I feel I do anyway, but in this one, I was actively asked by a member of the local community, can you get us glasses? And I did. The moral of that story is, don't assume you know what a community wants, which is super easy to do when you're all educated and stuff. You have to live within the community for a long period of time for you to understand what they need. They might not want a seawall to protect their village. They might want to just move the village up anyway because they were flooding in the middle of the village in that bit, and they just want to get the whole village up the hill. We're talking about climate change and global sea rising, and we see that in Fiji a lot. But yeah, so this Novena based, and all other villages, by the way, the glasses were super, super fulfilling. I loved doing that. And if you want to donate, by the way, I'm accepting donations on my PayPal account. We've raised only £150 so far, but that's quite a few pairs of glasses, and they're going to be shipped over the next month or two. So what's next? So this one is possibly the most challenging I've had to deal with in all my time in Fiji. I've had a couple in Sri Lanka as well, but I think this one really tops it. So as part of the experience, when guests come to Fiji, they stay in a homestay. Depending on their tailored itinerary, they can stay 1 day up to 4 days, 5 days if they want. Generally, it's hard work after day 3 because you have to wash in the stream, no chairs, no light. So everything is dark at 6 o'clock in the evening. You're eating food from their menu, which is, sea urchins, octopus, cassava, dallo, belly, which is a coconut milk. Nice, actually. Yeah, so it's completely different food. So lots of challenges in village. So what I did was pay each for each guest. They get $60 per night per guest, so it's about £20, and that includes 3 meals and a night in the homestay. So everybody's happy with that. That's the going rate. I did my research beforehand. Homestays that were in existence before Island Spirit had been charging the same, paying the same. So it's very generous. There are lots of companies out there now. I'm not going to name any, but they're volunteer companies who pay their villages much, much less. So I pride myself on giving fair trade, value for money. So village, particularly Vindawa village, they had worked with me for about 2 or 3 years, and we had a good run. Everyone's happy. I pay 50% of their homestay money in advance, and so they can buy food, etc., and then 50% at the end, so nobody runs off with anything. That's happened before. When I first started, I paid a guide in advance, and he just didn't turn up for work and went off, and I found him hungover the next day on Fiji rum that he had the night before. So that's a kind of obvious one, but I've been stung by being generous. So back to the homestays. So it turned out that I kept saying to the village, so I thought we had agreed that you were going to paint that house, or I thought that you were going to buy some more equipment for the local office, like walking office, or you were going to buy a strimmer for the gardening for the whole village or whatnot. They kept saying to me that they love all this extra money because they're going to do up the village and make life better. Because ultimately, what are we doing this for? It's to improve the quality of life of people who don't have the same quality of life as we do. So I was noticing that nothing is really changing. And then I saw some men, I believe, a few days later, after I paid them, in town buying alcohol. And I didn't necessarily equate the two together particularly, but it just made me look at the bigger picture. It was quite disturbing to see that the money that I'd given them was more or less definitely going to buy alcohol. And it wasn't all that money and it wasn't that much alcohol. However, the principle really resonated in my head and made me feel like something needs to change here. So I called a meeting with the chief and the Tarangani Koro, which is the spokesman, and all the women of the village and all the men who wanted to come. Many men are always up in the mountains or in the forest mountains during the week farming. So there were probably about 60% women and 40% men, and about 20 to 30 people in the village hall. We sat down. Same scenario as always, more or less every night in Fiji. Sat down, carve a bowl in the middle, and everyone shares carver and then relaxes and someone's playing the guitar. And then the meeting's called by the Tarangi Koro. And he handed it over to me. So I was talking and I introduced an idea, which was that I would pay them the same. Everything's the same value, no problem, but that I wanted to hold back 30% and I would buy assets for them instead of giving them money. I made sure they could understand that, and then I waited for their response. And there were lots of whispers and chatters and frowns and shakings of heads and rolling of eyes. And then a woman came forward. She put her hand up and wants to talk. So we're all sitting all the time, and said, "We think you're greedy. Some accusations were greed. What else was there? You don't understand our lifestyle. How can you do this to us? You can't go back on your word." Lots of aggressive accusations, basically to do with me stealing their money that they deserve. And so I tried to explain again, I'm not taking any money away from the pot. I'm just going to hold back 30%, and I'm going to present to them a piece of paper that they can choose what I can buy for them. They have the town to choose from, Nangara village on Taveuni. They can choose anything in that town, and I would get it and bring it. No problem, transport I'll deal with, but I'll bring the value of 30% of their normal homestay income to the village. And then they had another chit chat and a gossip and no, we don't want that. We want our money, they said, that we want our money. We deserve our money. We work hard for our money. We want our money, and that's it. Otherwise, you won't do this anymore. So I said, okay, let's call this meeting to an end now, and I'll come back, we'll have another talk about it, have a think again about what I said. So when I came back a few days later, I said to them, okay, so have you ever thought about anything? And they all said, no, we don't want to do anything. We want to have the money. And I said, okay, look, here we go. This is a better way of explaining it and describing it. Why not? Why don't you choose from one of these 3 projects? And I did the work for them. I know that they really love holding, what do they call it now? They're basically like evening gigs. So 5 or 6 people will play the guitar, there'll be dancing and food. They love doing that. And they raise money for the local churches and for the school and for the local like management offices. They raise money for themselves. Can you believe it's incredible? So they I know they want to have huge cooking pots. I just know that because I've lived there and I know and I can see. So huge cooking pots. And so I said, right, so with the money that you could potentially earn, let's say with 3 guests staying for 3 nights, whatever, I'm just making this up, by the way, but I calculated the value and I said 30% of it would buy you 3 huge cooking pots. And with those cooking pots, you can make even more money if you have a fundraising event once every 2 weeks or once a month. You can earn so much more because you can host more people from the other villages. So and then it went on and on. I carried on saying, like, look, here I can buy solar lanterns for your village, for your house, that are portable, that are powered by the sun. It means it's less dangerous for your children, less expensive because kerosene is so expensive. Kerosene lamps are the other options. And so, yeah, I gave them these 2 options, and along with many others, and they absolutely loved it. And I was like, yes, I've won. This is amazing. So it is true. I did win. Why? Because I persevered and I was convinced they would be better off with this. So instead of letting their husbands spend it on rum, they're actually improving their quality of life. But I've had to force feed it to them, and they did have to agree. It's just a matter of presentation and convincing. So that's a really good one and a positive ending. So I hope that one can inspire a thought. It's quite hard to put this into context with what you're doing, I guess. But yeah, all these ideas can inspire any creative thinking and like social enterprise ideas. Another one is that your great idea may not be shared. So it's less about moral values. It's more like ideas being shared. So I'm trying to keep this one short. We've only got a little bit of time. So I was like, okay, there's an area of the land that's touching the shore, the shoreline, should we say so, outside a village on Taviuni that has a space to plant lots of mangroves. And there were some mangrove saplings just lying on the beach. They're long, thin, sausage-like saplings. One end is little root and the other end has a knobble on it. So you know which one is up. The knobble goes up and the root goes down. All you have to do is stick it into the sand. It's so easy. But the difficulty is, normally in different environments, you wouldn't be able to find the sapling. So we have the saplings there and a really cool area of mangrove, the red mangrove that could be planted. So many of my guests and the volunteers would come and plant here. But I did get permission from the village, which is inland. That's what you have to do all the time. Anything you do, you need permission from the chief of the local village. So I got the permission, but I noticed after planting session number 3, that a boat was starting to be moored there. And then very soon after that, the saplings were being pulled down. So yeah, my agenda was to replant the mangrove area to protect the road from rising sea levels, because every year I was going back, more palm trees were falling down and the sea would come higher up over and cover the entire road. So on high tide, you couldn't drive through. So this mangrove would have helped prevent the high tide from coming up in years to come. But still, the point is, it's an environmental conservation project. But the locals didn't agree at all because it was great for mooring their boat. So there you go. You can't have everything. And, you know, to this day, I think it's probably still an area that is very vulnerable by the forces from the ocean. And I couldn't do my bit with everyone. Even the local children were planting with us. It was amazing. But yeah, the men, they rule. So I also wanted to mention Cyclone Thomas. So we did a cyclone relief program, which was kind of unplanned, as cyclones are. I was in Fiji getting a roll on, really marketing for the forthcoming season. Everything was going to plan. And then Cyclone Winston just came along out of nowhere. It was cyclone season, but when we say cyclone season, we don't see cyclones all the time. They're like one, or if you're really unlucky, 2 per season. But this one was particularly huge. Anyway, it came and hit straight on Taveuni at, 200 kilometers an hour, insane speeds, if not more than that. And, when coconuts are flying horizontally through the air, can you imagine? A coconut is often as heavy as your head, full of water. And hopefully that demonstrates the sheer velocity of this wind and the destruction, devastation it causes. So I think it was for the next 3 weeks, the whole island, no boat services. It means no outer imports for food. There was, you couldn't access roads, so infrastructure had stopped. Huge air hanger craft were coming in from Australia, those big grey ones with the back end completely open, landed and just pushed out flour, onions, rice, medical equipment in huge sacks. It was a proper aid. I've never seen anything like it, aid operation. So the New Zealand and Australian governments funded loads. So I did a fundraiser and raised about how much was it? About £1,000. And so I spent a lot of time zooming around, getting onions from the shops, of which the onions were really sparse. So I had to coordinate with see when the boat when it did come in, what time, and get them first because everyone wanted them. Then rice and all this aid stuff. We had the money, but we just couldn't get it to the outer islands. So we had to book the boats. The boats didn't have fuel. The fuel had run out because there wasn't a boat coming in. Had to wait for the next boat to come in. Then we had to distribute all these clothes that the main island, which is 24 hours away by boat, people on that island were giving me sacks of clothes to give to the outer islanders, because on the main island they look at the outer islanders as really poor, impoverished and like misfortunate people, when actually their life is actually a bit better. But anyway, all these clothes are coming, seeds and sewing equipment and tools and medical, oh my god, everything you can think of. So coordinating that, what I wanted to say is it just took sheer time and money. I spent probably £1,000 of my money and then of fundraise money as well. I ended up spending a lot just on the things that you didn't think were going to cost that much, like the fuel of the boats, etc. So yeah, aid isn't cheap. So yeah, I think I'm going to stop there because it's been 40 minutes and I hope that I haven't gone on too much, but I've got some more. If you want to talk more about more like on the ground field examples, I'm really happy to talk again and explain. I'll be here on Friday, on Friday at 4 o'clock for question and answers. So feel free to write down anything you want and let me know reasonable questions that I can answer. Okay, I hope that was helpful and I will see you on Friday at 4.